Hello and welcome back to my channel. It's been a really long time since I made like a long form video. I've been really active on shorts, but today I want to chat about sourdough and this felt like the right form to have a little bit of a longer video. I have 7 tips that I think will help you to implement on bake day to make sure that your sourdough doesn't fall flat or come out burnt or any of the other things that could go wrong. And just to kind of like prove a point, the dough that I'm baking today has been in my fridge since Saturday. So no, Friday, because I baked one on Saturday. So this one has been in the fridge Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Oh God. This loaf has been in the fridge cold proofing for 5 days. So it actually looks kind of overproofed and over fermented, so this is going to be a really good test to see how this loaf turns out with these tips. We'll see. It will be a true test. The first tip is something you have to do before you even start thinking about baking your bread, and that I actually kind of questioned when I first started making bread, and that is, do I really need to preheat my oven for an hour before I bake the bread? But the reason why you would want to do that is because you don't actually know how hot your oven is inside unless you have a thermometer in there. So if you have a manual knob to set the temperature of your oven, or I have an electric oven but I don't actually have a thermometer inside, so I don't have any way to know if that's really accurate or not. So preheating the oven for like 45 minutes to an hour with the Dutch oven inside ensures that it's really hot in there and ready to go. The second tip is to use rice flour for dusting your bread before you score it. Rice flour doesn't absorb hydration in the same way that other flours do, like all-purpose. So we don't want to be pulling any hydration out of our dough or making it any drier. So I definitely recommend using rice flour at this step. The next tip is all about scoring. So right off the bat, doing any sort of decorative score is totally optional. The only one you really need to do is that big expansion score, because that's what's going to help your bread rise in the oven. If you do the expansion score first, the bread will start to expand, exactly, and you don't really want it to be sitting out on your counter expanding while you're perfecting your little decoration. So definitely leave the expansion score to right before you're about to bake. Tips 4 and 5 are done right back to back, and number 4 is to pop some ice cubes into the Dutch oven to create steam. I have my dough on parchment, so I drop it in the Dutch oven and then I put 2 or 3 ice cubes underneath the parchment and then throw the lid on really quick to trap all that steam, which really encourages that bread to rise in the oven. And tip number 5, once you get that Dutch oven in the oven, slide a cookie sheet right on the rack underneath it. This just creates a barrier between the very hot oven and the Dutch oven and prevents that bottom crust from getting burnt. Tip number 6 is another pretty popular one that I was skeptical of, and that is the 5-minute score or the 7-minute score. Basically, after your bread has been actually in the oven and baking for 5 to 7 minutes, you'll slide it out and score it a second time. This is a really good little trick to encourage the bread to form an ear. I've definitely gotten ears on my sourdough bread with just doing the 1 expansion score, but if you feel like you are having a little bit of trouble and you really want to get that ear, definitely give the 5 or 7-minute score a try. It's the moment of truth. Isn't she lovely? Now that the bread is out of the oven, we have reached the final tip number 7, the hardest one to follow. The only thing that you want to do when it comes out of the oven and you're smelling how good this smells is to cut it open and to eat it. If you cut your bread too early, the crumb potentially did not fully develop and you might end up with a gummy, almost underbaked looking inside. Even if your bread is at temperature and you know that it's fully baked, you really need to let it cool. Just trust me. Like I said before, this was cold proofing in the fridge for 5 days. So this is quite the test. You can see I actually did get a pretty nice ear. Oven spring is a little bit lower because it definitely was in the fridge for too long, but the crust on the bottom is perfect, not burnt. You could definitely bake it longer if you like a darker, more caramelized crust, but honestly, I like it like this. It's easier to cut and easier to eat. So overall, super happy with how this overproof loaf came out with these tips today. So I hope that you will subscribe and stick around for more sourdough videos to come, but I also love cooking other stuff. Breakfast recipes, dinner recipes, other baked goods. Thanks for watching.